afternoon. This is Aaron McWilliams. Always great to be with you and actually on the air on time this time. I mean, it is kind of funny that I did actually somehow miss an entire hour of my day that I just jumped ahead. It's one of those days. But joining me in the studio to help me get through the day together, Tim and John from Rydell. They're both from the body shop, both been there about 3 years. How you guys doing?
Doing good. Good.
Yep, doing good.
All right, now a little bit more excitement, fellas.
Doing great.
That's what I thought.
Fantastic.
You see, that's what I thought. All right, now you guys are both from the body shop. What kind of things do y'all work on over there? Or what's the hardest to work on?
That I would say, like, probably whole side bodies if it gets that serious. Like, some serious, like, if the job gets past 40 hours, that would be some of the toughest jobs to do.
Working on frames, straightening out the frames.
Now, that sounds interesting. Tell me about the straightening out of the frames. So, a guy runs into a tree because he was trying to push it over. He just couldn't, his chainsaw wouldn't start that day. I don't know why, but the guy really wanted to just get that tree down. And he ran head on into the tree, bent his frame. What do you do with it?
First, you would measure the frame and see how messed up it is. And then you would go and get the... what's the word for it? You go by the book, basically, is what I'm trying to say, and figure out where exactly the frame should be in the first place. And then you would base it off the measurements that you have, and then you would go on straightening on the frame rack from there.
Yeah, they're really specific for like the repair procedures for each type of vehicle, make, model. As far as the measurements are concerned, it's very precise. So the equipment that we have measures it to the exact specifications, and then you pull it, push it, bend it back into the specifications that are required for that specific vehicle.
All right. Now, when we talk about a frame rack, I've heard this word before. Tell our guests, what exactly is a frame rack? I mean, do you take the entire car off the frame, but a lot of these are like unibodies. Can you straighten out a unibody frame, or is it just, frame on chassis kind of that you can work with?
I can't give a confident answer about unibodies, but I can tell you that what we do is typically you tear apart the front end and possibly take off the rear bumper, if more serious, the box as well, if like on a pickup truck, let's say. And then you'd put the whole vehicle on the frame rack, and then you have some chains to chain it down to keep it in place, and then you take other chains and whatnot to pull it in whatever direction you may need be.
Mm-hmm. Yep. All right. So Texter writes in at 775-55-59. I don't know how to frame up this text, but it does say, if a frame gets bent in a collision, and then an auto body shop bends it again, doesn't that weaken the steel?
Well, right. That is a very real possibility, and more often than not, depending on what type of steel was bent or what type of metal was bent, most of the time the vehicle will become totaled because they are correct. It will become weaker. It just depends where the bend was, how severe it was, how much you have to bend it back into place. There's a lot that comes into play, but that is a correct statement in that it does weaken it. So more often than not, very rarely do we have a frame job that doesn't get totaled out because of that. Most of the time, the metal that we're bending back is super high strength steel on like a big 3500 or something like that could kind of take a little bit more punishment. But on smaller, lighter vehicles, very rarely are we bending metal back into place. Interesting.
All right, 775-5559. Caller, go ahead. You're on the air with Tim and John from the Rydell.
Yeah, just a quick body work question. In your guys' experience, like, what's easier to work with? Your regular, steel bodies, just hammering out dents and welding and pulling out dents and that whole thing? Or is it easier to do that on an aluminum vehicle, like with, aluminum body, like an F-150? Some foreign cars are aluminum. I don't know if you guys have had to do anything with F-150s, considering you guys are mostly Chevrolet and Toyota. But, yeah, I guess that's the question. What's easier to work with, aluminum bodies or steel bodies? I'll hang up and listen. Thank you.
Thanks for the call.
I would 100% say steel. Steel is much easier to work with than aluminum.
Yeah, and I will also say that aluminum, and yes, we are actually certified Ford. We do a lot of Ford certified work. And so we actually supposed to have their own aluminum bay to do aluminum work in. But yeah, that aluminum work is much more difficult to deal with than regular steel.
I didn't even know you could work on an aluminum body.
Yeah,
because I've worked with aluminum quite a bit. I mean, and you bend that stuff and it's going to break.
Yeah.
And it's not like you can heat it up and bend it back like you can metal and reform that metal.
It takes like special aluminum tools just to work on aluminum. You can't use tools that you work on steel on the aluminum.
Yeah,
that would make sense. I've never really thought about it like that, so I appreciate the question. 775-5559. Dexter writes in and says, is rust repair still a thing? Or is it the standard practice to replace the entire quarter panel when the wheel well is rusted?
I mean, we're pretty passionate about this topic. We get a lot of it because there's a lot of rust out here. But the standard is to replace the entire thing because once rust starts, you're never going to get rid of it unless you replace the entire panel. You might be able to cover it up, maybe do a couple of things here and there, but it will always return. So the standard practice would be replacing a panel or even just leaving it and buying a new car.
Dexter writes in, 775-5559, says, I have a new Toyota Tacoma, and the paint is so easy to chip. If I sneeze on it, the paint chips. Is Toyota having issues with certain paints?
I wouldn't say Toyota has any particular issues with their paints, but I can say that it's thinner than your standard GM. I will say that.
Yeah, the paint thickness on Toyotas are a little bit thinner. Yes.
I've never heard that. I mean, I have you guys in here every Tuesday, and we talk about Toyotas a lot because I've owned them, I've sold them, and that's the first I've ever heard that paint on Toyotas are thinner than, say, you said a GM truck.
Yeah, it's slightly. I mean, it's not. There's different reasons why Toyota does business differently than others, but that they do it for a very specific purpose. You know what I mean? And it's really Toyota's reasoning behind it. But all I know is that when you measure the thickness of the paint, there is a difference between the thickness of the paint between a Toyota and a GM.
That's really interesting. So does that mean that they scratch up easier, they chip easier, a Toyota does compared to, say, a GM or a Ford?
I wouldn't say that because the clear is really what's more important. And so I just think that all of them are susceptible to chipping, especially if you're around here on gravel roads. Rocks, it's crazy how quickly, especially nowadays, how paint can chip so quickly. And some of it too is the clear coming off the manufacturing line compared to what we kind of use in our shop. Once we repair it, our clear is a little bit more hard. And so it just depends.
All right, so you talk about clear. Help me out here and walk me through the layers then of painting a car. So if you start off with a new panel, if you get a rock chip, you get a dent, you got to replace the panel. What does that look like? Because you said coming off the assembly lines, it's thinner, it's not as hard as what you put on in the body shop. So walk me through that. What does that actually mean?
It's been a while since I painted a vehicle, but based off memory, I know there's the E-coat, which helps with corrosion and things like that. Then there's your base coat, which is what gives it color. That's just basically whatever you might want. And then on top of that is the clear coat, which protects everything.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, you essentially, when we get it, we strip it, prime it, and then paint it, like how John said, with those layers. And then it's interesting, though, once you kind of get into it, there's so many different types of paint and clear coat out there. And so we kind of rely on our paint supplier to supply us with, the new cutting edge technology to make sure that our work is always almost above standard.
So what kind of things can you actually buff out?
Anything that's not scratched through the base coat.
Yeah.
If it's just like in the clear coat, you can buff and wet sand buff through the clear coat itself and make it look brand new.
Yeah.
All right. 775-5559. Dexter writes in and says, I worked auto body for 39 years. It was uncanny how certain models would have the same hit. I attributed it to poor vision, like windshield pillar areas. Another texter writes in and says, I have a 2015 Silverado, and the rear quarters are beginning to blister above the wheel wells. Is it a big job or not so bad? Is the only way to fix it by cutting out where it's blistering?
Say that's rust.
Yep.
That's 100% rust. You do like a whole box side for that.
Yeah, it would. It's a pretty in-depth job to replace those box sides sometimes.
All right, so if you have a 2015 Silverado okay, we're going to say it's a 1500 Silverado, and you've got to change that out. How in depth is that, and do you know any prices on that? How long does it take to do?
I mean, it could go anywhere from, it could be 20 hours to 40 hours. It just greatly depends on the, different specifications, different issues going on with it. But if we're just picking up and replacing a box, like the entire box because both sides are bad, I mean, that's a little bit more straightforward because you're not having to cut anything out. But once you start getting into cutting things and sectioning things and trying to get things to line up again, that's where it gets a little bit more complicated and a little bit more complex. So you're dealing with a little bit higher price point because of the labor involved with it. But outside of that, I mean, it all just greatly depends on what's going on and how long, and each repair procedure and things like that are gonna take a technician to fix it. So,
all right, 775-5559. Caller, go ahead. You're on the air with Tim and John from Rydell.
Hey, I got a question for John. See, I have a 2011 Chevrolet Tahoe I purchased at the police auto auction. It has a lot of rust. Can you take care of it with a little body putty?
It'd probably take a lot of body putty because from the rust that you're seeing on the vehicle, it can almost guarantee that rust is like twice the size than what you're actually seeing.
Yeah.
So how would you know that you got all the rust? I mean, what's the surefire way to make sure that you got all the rust?
Replacing the panel.
Yeah, cut everything out and replace it. And John's absolutely right. I mean, what you see is only, you know what I mean, is much different behind those panels because there's another inside panel to that outside panel. And so that inside panel is probably what's taking the brunt of the rust. And so the second you cut something out thinking that it's just a small little bubble on the outside, that whole back panel could be gone and there's nothing left there.
I like to think of it as like an iceberg. You only see the tip of it, and then it's much bigger underneath.
I remember going up to, this is a number of years ago, went over to Rydell in Hillsborough, to Napa in Hillsborough. And a guy was walked up to the counter in Napa, and he said, "Hey, could you just do me a favor and take a look at my back bumper? I put a camper on, and the whole thing kind of bent down, and it was weird." And he was real busy. And I said, "Well, look, I'll take a look for you." And I went over and I looked. The only thing that trailer ball was touching was the plastic. There was no metal underneath his bumper.
Nice.
There was nothing there. And I told the fella, I said, honestly, I'd park it.
Yeah.
I would not take this on the road. You looked at you looked at this frame and you realized there was very little frame left, that these leaf springs were hooked on, were on. There was very little metal left on the frame of this vehicle.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen something like that? What's the worst you've ever seen?
Sure, I think
that something similar to that, I would say, is the worst I've ever seen.
There's other ones too where people might bring in a box side and want to put some wheel flares on it, but there's just nothing. There's no metal to attach anything to, and it's just it becomes a problem because you just can't put those on there. There's nothing to you can't even screw them in. You can't even drill a hole because there's no metal to drill a hole through. So.
I've experienced that firsthand.
Yeah. There's no amount of duct tape that's really gonna bring that back to life.
Well, I mean, you could probably duct tape it all, and it might.
That's a whole different look. I mean, now if you just do a single stripe of duct tape, does that still count as a pinstripe?
Depend. I mean, it's I guess it's subjective.
Okay. All right. 775-5559. Texter writes in and says, "Is there an easy / effective way to get rust off of a wheel? Ideally, something cheap that I could do at home."
If it's a chrome wheel, I'd recommend steel wool. Just steel wool and rub it up on there. It typically cleans up chrome real well.
Yeah.
Depends on what the wheel's made of, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, rust is going to be a problem no matter what you do up here. I mean, and the only recommendation that I would ever give anybody is if you really care a lot about your vehicle and you don't want rust to happen, especially in the wintertime, you get it back, you put it in the garage, just rinse it off with a little bit of water, because then that takes all the chemicals or whatever is on the road off of your car, and so that's sometimes what I do, but everyone has different ways of dealing with it, I guess.
All right. Texter wants to know. He says, "Ask your guest about PDR." I don't know what that is.
Paintless dent repair.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, we we have 2 outstanding PDR technicians, and they'll get just about any dent out for you. And if you have a question or you have a dent that you want to get looked at, we have both of them are available to come look at it if you stop by.
So where's a situation that I would see where I would use a service like a paintless dent repair?
Hail. So if you have hail. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. So if you have hail, your car gets beat up with hail. They just push those dents out. I mean, there's a lot of dents, but they have specialized tools that push the dents out, and most of the time, once they're done, you can't even tell.
So is that like a suction cup then that you just kind of pull it out, or is that the same thing that you would see like at Harbor Freight dent repair? What would be the difference of me getting an at-home dent repair kit from, say, Harbor Freight or Amazon versus taking it to you guys?
They have a wide variety of different, like, push tools is what they call them, and there's like different length bars, and it's just a ton of different push tools to push the dent out. But at the same time, they also have new, it's like fairly new system, glue pulling with hot glue and sticking it right in the center of the dent and slowly working its way out that way.
Yep. Yeah, I mean you could probably attempt it at home, but there's layers to it, especially if you're pushing it from the inside out. Because you push too hard, you push too much, you'll start seeing those little lines. You start pushing it too much, and you can see the difference in the body panel. These guys, the guys that we have been trained, and they know exactly how much pressure to put on there. And I'll tell you, it looks like there was never a dent there to begin with.
Very good. Next texter comes in, says 775-5559. Says, my pickup frame is rusty, but is not structurally compromised. Anyone around do cleanup and recoating?
I'm sure there's some people out there. I'm not too sure if there's any out there that will do like sandblasting or something like that to get the rust off. As long as it's not structurally compromised, I think all you're kind of dealing with is surface rust there. But yeah, off the top of my head, I'm not too sure.
No, I mean, to deal with something like that, but you have to take the entire bed off of the truck and pretty much strip that to the frame.
Yeah.
And then sandblast it and then coat it in something.
Yeah, it's kind of a long and arduous process to take everything apart to get that to the bare bones frame. So
that sounds like a time-intensive, expensive process.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'd imagine so.
All right. More to come with the Rydell guys, but Tim.
I'd say probably, if I'm going to give a little bit more narrow of an estimate, probably close to about $7,000 to $10,000. It just depend greatly on how much the box itself would cost.
Well, and I guess you could get some used ones. So here's a question for you then. We'll say I'm that guy that's got the 2012 GMC Sierra, and I go to the scrap yard. I pull the box myself. Can I bring that to you guys and y'all put it on and then like paint match it or something? Or how would that work? Or you only use parts that you buy?
Well, there's a couple liabilities there because of our certifications and things like that. It's really tough to kind of work around some of that because we could be held liable if it's a part that's not been inspected or something like that. So when we buy our parts, we buy them certified, used, aftermarket, however you might want to call it. And so typically we don't do stuff like that. Typically we source the part to make sure that it's up to standards, and then we install it. Because like I said, we have a lot of certifications that require a lot of different types of that has just a lot of different requirements, and so it becomes a liability doing things like that.
But what if a guy, say, put the box on himself and he just brought it to you guys to paint it?
Well,
and be able to color match it.
Yeah, so I mean, I would love to say that it's that simple, and I would love to say that we would absolutely do it, but we are strictly a collision shop, right? So our painters and all of our technicians are focused solely on collision work. So, getting into the busy time of year, things like extracurricular like that to kind of just do on the side, very difficult to do. And we don't typically have time to do things outside of collision work.
All right, but anything else, we'll say like hail repair, like now you said paintless dent repair.
Yes.
Right? So things like a paintless dent repair, absolutely that's something you guys can do.
Absolutely.
Absolutely fix it when you run it into the tree.
Yep.
Right?
Absolutely. Yep.
I mean, I don't know why you would want to purposely do that, but Some people.
Yeah, you never know.
All right. Fellas, thank you so much for coming on today. Y'all have a wonderful day.